Dr. Watson was considerably startled by this fresh proof of the practical nature of his companion's theories. His respect for Holmes's powers of analysis increased wondrously. There still remained some lurking suspicion in his mind, however, that the whole thing was a prearranged episode intended to dazzle him, though what earthly object Holmes could have in taking him in was past his comprehension.
How in the world did you deduce that?
Deduce what?
That he was a retired sergeant of Marines.
I have no time for trifles. Excuse my rudeness, you broke the thread of my thoughts, but perhaps it is as well. So you actually were not able to see that that man was a sergeant of Marines?
No, indeed.
It was easier to know it than to explain why I knew it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact. Even across the street, I could see a great blue anchor tattooed on the back of the fellow's hand. That smacked of the sea. He had a military carriage, however, and regulation side whiskers. There we have the Marine. He was a man with some amount of self-importance and a certain air of command. You must have observed the way in which he held his head and swung his cane, a steady, respectable, middle-aged man too, on the face of him. All facts which led me to believe that he had been a sergeant.
Wonderful.
Commonplace. I said just now that there were no criminals. It appears that I am wrong. Look at this.
This is terrible.
It does seem to be a little out of the common. Would you mind reading it to me aloud?
My dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, there has been a bad business during the night at 3, Lauriston Gardens, off the Brixton Road. Our man on the beat saw a light there about 2 in the morning, and as the house was an empty one, suspected that something was amiss. He found the door open, and in the front room, which is bare of furniture, discovered the body of a gentleman, well dressed and having cards in his pocket bearing the name of Enoch J. Drebber, Cleveland, Ohio, USA. There had been no robbery, nor is there any evidence as to how the man met his death. There are marks of blood in the room, but there is no wound upon his person. We are at a loss as to how he came into the empty house. Indeed, the whole affair is a puzzler. If you can come round to the house any time before 12, you will find me there. I have left everything in statu quo until I hear from you. If you are unable to come, I shall give you fuller details and would esteem it a great kindness if you would favour me with your opinion. Yours faithfully, Tobias Gregson.
Gregson is the smartest of the Scotland Yarders. He and Lestrade are the pick of a bad lot. They are both quick and energetic, but conventional. Shockingly so. They have their knives into one another, too. They are as jealous as a pair of professional beauties. There will be some fun over this case if they are both put upon the scent.
Surely there is not a moment to be lost. Shall I go and order you a cab?
I'm not sure about whether I shall go. I'm the most incurably lazy devil that ever stood in shoe leather. That is when the fit is on me, for I can be spry enough at times.
Why? It is just such a chance as you have been longing for.
My dear fellow, what does it matter to me? Supposing I unravel the whole matter, you may be sure that Gregson Lestrade will pocket all the credit. That comes of being an unofficial personage.
But he begs you to help him.
Yes, he knows that I am his superior and acknowledges it to me, but he would cut his tongue out before he would own it to any third person. However, we may as well go and have a look. I shall work it out on my own hook. I may have a laugh at them if I have nothing else. Come on. Get your hat now.
You wish me to come?
Yes, if you have nothing better to do.
A minute later, both Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson were in a hansom, driving furiously for the Brixton Road. It was a foggy, cloudy morning, and a dun-coloured veil hung over the housetops, looking like the reflection of the mud-coloured streets beneath. Sherlock Holmes was in the best of spirits and prattled away about Cremona fiddles and the difference between a Stradivarius and an Amati. As for Dr. Watson, he was silent, for the dull weather and the melancholy business upon which they were engaged depressed his spirits.
You don't seem to give much thought to the matter in hand.
No data yet. It is a capital mistake to theorize before you have all the evidence. It biases the judgment.
You will have your data soon. This is the Brixton Road, and that is the house, if I am not very much mistaken.
So it is. Stop, driver, stop.
Number 3. Lauriston Gardens wore an ill-omened and minatory look. It was one of 4 which stood back some little way from the street, 2 being occupied and 2 empty. The latter looked out with 3 tiers of vacant melancholy windows, which were blank and dreary. save that here and there a to let card had developed like a cataract upon the bleared panes. A small garden sprinkled over with a scattered eruption of sickly plants separated each of these houses from the street and was traversed by a narrow pathway, yellowish in colour and consisting apparently of a mixture of clay and of gravel. The whole place was very sloppy from the rain which had fallen through the night. The garden was bounded by a 3-foot brick wall with a fringe of wood rails upon the top, and against this wall was leaning a stalwart police constable, surrounded by a small knot of loafers who craned their necks and strained their eyes in the vain hope of catching some glimpse of the proceedings within. At the door of the house, they were met by a tall, white-faced, flaxen-haired man with a notebook in his hand, who rushed forward and wrung Holmes's hand with effusion.
It is indeed kind of you to come. I have had everything left untouched.
Except that. If a herd of buffaloes had passed along, there could not be a greater mess. No doubt, however, you had drawn your own conclusions, Gregson, before you permitted this.
I have had so much to do inside the house. My colleague, Mr. Lestrade, is here. I had relied upon him to look after this.
With 2 such men as yourself and Lestrade upon the ground, there will not be much for a third party to find out.
I think we have done all that can be done. It's a queer case, though, and I knew your taste for such things.
You did not come here in a cab?
No, sir.
Nor Lestrade?
No, sir.
Then let us go and look at the room.
A short passage, bare-planked and dusty, led to the kitchen and offices. 2 doors opened out of it to the left and to the right. One of these had obviously been closed for many weeks. The other belonged to the dining room, which was the apartment in which the mysterious affair had occurred. Holmes walked in, and Dr. Watson followed him with that subdued feeling at his heart which the presence of death inspires. The room, with its vulgar paper and filthy window, seemed to loom larger without furniture. The body of the deceased, a man in his 40s with a contorted, ape-like expression, lay lifeless on the floor. Sherlock Holmes examined the body closely.
This case will make a stir, sir. It beats anything I've seen, and I'm no chicken.
There is no clue.
None at all.
You are sure that there is no wound?
Positive.
Then, of course, this blood belongs to a second individual, presumably the murderer, if murder has been committed. It reminds me of the circumstances attendant on the death of Van Jansen in Utrecht in the year 34. Do you remember the case, Gregson?
No, sir.
Read it up, you really should. There is nothing new under the sun. It has all been done before. He has not been moved at all.
No more than was necessary for the purposes of our examination.
Gregson had a stretcher and 4 men at hand. At his call, they entered the room and the stranger was lifted and carried out. As they raised him, a ring tinkled down and rolled across the floor. Lestrade grabbed it up and stared at it with mystified eyes.
There's been a woman here. It's a woman's wedding ring.
Well, this complicates matters. Heaven knows they were complicated enough before.
You're sure it doesn't simplify them? There's nothing to be learned by staring at it. What did you find in his pockets?
We have it all here. A gold watch, number 97163, by Barraud of London. Gold Albert chain, very heavy and solid. Gold ring with Masonic device. Gold pin, bulldog's head with rubies as eyes. Russian leather card case with cards of Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland, corresponding with the E.J.D. upon the linen. No purse, but loose money to the extent of £7.13. Pocket edition of Boccaccio's Decameron, with name of Joseph Stangerson upon the flyleaf. 2 letters, one addressed to E.J. Drebber and one to Joseph Stangerson.
At what address?
American Exchange Strand, to be left till called for. They are both from the Guion Steamship Company and refer to the sailing of their boats from Liverpool. It is clear that this unfortunate man was about to return to New York.
Have you made any inquiries as to this man, Stangerson?
I did it at once, sir. I have had advertisements sent to all the newspapers, and one of my men has gone to the American Exchange, but he has not returned yet.
Have you sent to Cleveland?
We telegraphed this morning.
How did you word your inquiries?
I simply detailed the circumstances and said that we should be glad of any information which could help us.
You did not ask for particulars on any point which appeared to you to be crucial.
I asked about Stangerson.
Nothing else? Is there no circumstance on which this whole case appears to hinge? Will you not telegraph again?
I have said all I have to say.
I really beg your pardon. You certainly have the credit of being the first of us to find this out, and as you say, it bears every mark of having been written by the other participant in last night's mystery. I have not had time to examine this room yet, but with your permission, I shall do so now. They say that genius is an infinite capacity for taking pains. It's a very bad definition, but it does apply to detective work.
What do you think of it, sir?
It would be robbing you of the credit of the case if I was to presume to help you. You are doing so well now that it would be a pity for anyone to interfere. If you will let me know how your investigations go, I shall be happy to give you any help I can. In the meantime, I should like to speak to the constable who found the body. Can you give me his name and address?
John Rance. He is off duty now. You will find him at 46, Audley Court, Kennington Park Gate.
Come along, Doctor. We shall go and look him up. I'll tell you one thing which may help you in the case. There has been murder done, and the murderer was a man. He was more than 6 feet high, was in the prime of life, had small feet for his height, wore coarse, square-toed boots, and smoked a Trichinopoly cigar. He came here with his victim in a 4-wheeled cab, which was drawn by a horse with 3 old shoes and 1 new one on his off foreleg. In all probability, the murderer had a florid face, and the fingernails of his right hand were remarkably long. These are only a few indications, but they may assist you.
If this man was murdered, how was it done?
Poison. One other thing, Lestrade. Rache is the German for revenge, so don't lose your time looking for Miss Rachel.